for being with me. Hey, I am in South Carolina, and this week we are doing a fairy tree, which I'm very excited about. I'm a big tree lover, and as I said in the last video, I feel like if you're going to have fairy trees, you have to have at least one tree. So I'm going to show you a very basic way to make a tree using air dry clay. And I'm using a Propel water bottle, as you can see. Just the basic things that we've used so far. Okay, and your tree may not look at all like my tree, and that's fine. Okay, but this is kind of the basics. So I took a Propel water bottle, and I cut off the bottom, so it kind of stood on its own a bit. And then I used my tin foil, and I have my hot glue gun heating up on the side. I need to apologize right from the get-go. Some of this video is it's not really in the frame the way it should be. It's off to the left, and I apologize for that. I promise by the next video I will have worked out those kinks, and I'll make sure everything is centered and you can see it much better. Anyway, I'm making my first coils here. This is for the base of the tree, okay? And at the same time, I'm kind of thinking of the roots because I want it to be a gnarly tree with roots that actually help it stand. So you'll see me just kind of building little by little using coils of tin foil glued to my water bottle, and preparing the armature for this gnarly, fun tree. And again, this is just a process. Yours may not look like mine at all, but this is just kind of a fun tutorial to kind of open your mind as to how you could do a tree. As far as this tree, as I said, I'm going to be having gnarly roots that kind of come out onto the ground that will help to support it. At the same time, the bark will kind of wrap around the tree in a very gnarly fashion. And I'm going to leave spaces here and there because I am going to put a light inside of this piece. So at night, the inside of the tree will light up a bit. You do not have to do that. You could just make it completely a solid tree. You don't have to consider leaving light holes or negative space for light to come through. It makes it a little bit more complicated, and you have to kind of think ahead to some degree. But you'll see what I mean as I'm moving along here. I'm kind of leaving open spaces in the so-called bark. I also create a primary hole, which would be like a big knot in the tree on one side, and on the opposite side I do the same thing, but I make that one in the shape of a heart, just for fun. Again, you don't have to do any of these things. I always have some water close by, and excuse me, in this water I've put a little bit of Ellene's craft glue and just stirred it in. Not much at all, just maybe less than 1/4 teaspoon. As you've heard me say in other videos, when you're applying the clay to clay, especially wet clay to dry clay. Let's say you're doing it over the course, you're making your piece over the course of a couple days. When you start in on the second day, and you'll be bumping up against your yesterday's hard clay, you need to add some water to that. So so they stick better. And I'm finding that having a little bit of glue seems to help in the water. I don't know, maybe it's not necessary, but that's kind of my trick at the moment, one of my little tricks. And I'm always learning as I go. I've been a decorative painter by trade, so a professional decorative painter for 27 years, and I still learn something every day. And I hope I learn until the day I die. And I think we should all be doing that and be open to doing that, continuing to learn. So I'll share the things that I learn right alongside of you while we're doing these things together. So as you can see, I'm starting to build the tree at the same time that I'm building the twisty bark. I'm also putting out some gnarly roots. Again, that's going to help support it because in the end, this is going to be a relatively large tree. I think the tree that I am making ends up being about maybe 2 feet tall, so it has some weight to it. So there needs to be some support on the bottom. So yeah, you have to kind of think ahead so these pieces may support themselves. I want to just mention too, regarding the DOS clay, which soon I'll be opening up and starting to add DOS clay. I have been using DOS clay for several years, and I always buy a lot of it at one time. And I just recently bought several more 4-pound boxes. The boxes now are no longer blue, they're now white. And what I've found is the clay formula seems to have improved. It seems to be wetter and much more pliable than the clay that I've bought from DOS in the past. So that's a great thing. Maybe I'm misinterpreting something, but it sure seems to me like the formula has improved. So that's great. So in prior videos, I kind of showed you the trick about using saran wrap and some Vaseline to roll out. Well, if you're getting this newest DOS clay, you may not need to do that at all. I found that it was in perfect condition, that I didn't have to condition it with any oil or Vaseline or extra water. I just, right out of the container, I just kneaded it a bit and it was ready to go. And you'll kind of see that when I open the package. So that's a great new change. It makes things much easier. While we've been in South Carolina, we've been working on several different sculpture projects. It's been so much fun. And if you look on my channel, you'll see I did a very ornate, involved fairy house using things that I found around the cabin. And that was a lot of fun. We also made kind of, I guess we'll call it a fairy portal, a large wooden sculpture made of branches in our woods, and that's been a lot of fun. And I have a little video, a shorts video that you can watch too on this same channel. So we've been having lots of fun. My daughter travels a lot and lives and works in different places, and she has been in Montana for the entire winter. Just got home, and we have spent this time in South Carolina together. And actually today she's about to leave and is going back to Alaska for the season where she works. So she's a very adventurous spirit. So we decided to spend some time together at our cabin and we're both artists, and we both just really dug into art and just enjoyed each other and enjoyed nature. And boy, that's just, it doesn't get much better than that, does it? So I'm not going to show you all of the armature making here, but you're hopefully getting an idea, how much is involved here with the tree that I'm doing. The whole tree probably took me total, a few hours, and I did it over the course of 2 days. And again, it's something that you can start and stop. You can do it over the course of many days if you'd like. Just with the clay, again, when you're working wet onto dry clay, you need to have some moisture between those two layers. Okay, so now the armature is basically done, okay? So I've used quite a bit of tinfoil. You can kind of see the knots and the spaces. That will be the negative space where the light will come through once I have a light underneath it when it's all done. But again, as I start to apply my clay, I'll have to stay aware of where those negative spaces are and work around them. And you'll see what I mean as I'm doing this. So I'm going to take my first piece of clay and roll it out. Again, I apologize that I'm off the frame here, and that's hard to see. Again, I promise in the future to change how you are going to be seeing this, so it's much easier to view. But in any case, I'm doing my best here. Okay, so I'm rolling out my first piece. As you can see, I'm not using Vaseline. It's just rolling out beautifully with no extra conditioner, so it's perfect. And I'm going to apply it in pieces. Okay. And you can add a little bit of water to the tin foil. I didn't here just because I feel like there's plenty of moisture. Again, the condition of the clay is perfect, and it's stuck fine to the armature. If I felt like it was too dry and it was falling off, I'd tap a little bit of moisture, the water, onto the tin foil so it stuck better. But it was sticking very well here. Just pressing it into the curves, and also you'll notice as I get a piece on, I'll dip my fingers into the water and kind of smooth things out a little bit. So always make sure to have some water close by. Even use my roller to roll it down a bit. This is not an exact science. You'll just kind of get a feel for what works best for you. You see, I use my fingers a lot to do a lot of the sculpting, and water to smooth things out. So I'm going to work on one relatively big section. And then as you'll see, once I have a section done, let's say maybe a quarter of the tree, and the clay is still wet and pliable, then you'll see that I'm going to start to add some texture to the bark. Okay, so rather than getting all of the clay on in one shot on the entire tree and then going back and putting texture on the bark, the first clay would be much too hard. So you have to kind of do it in sections. So apply the clay, get it to stick into all the contours, and then you'll see in a minute that I start to, while it's still wet, to create bark texture. Also, I'm staying aware of the holes that I created, the negative spaces, we'll call them, to make sure that I'm working around or cutting in to make sure that those spaces stay negative spaces. I just think it would be really cool to have a tree that was kind of lit up from the inside. So that's what I did. This particular tree, I'm in a springy kind of mood, so my intent for this tree was to make it very light in color. Just keep it I have another tree that I've done that's very similar to this, and I did it with dark colored bark, but as you'll see, I just wanted this one to be really light and bright, with light colored foliage also, and it's going to go in the center of my dining room table. And I'll put fairy houses or whatever I want around it for the spring. So just bit by bit, I'm adding my clay. You could even add smaller bits, whatever works for you. See, I'm opening up those areas that go straight to the bottle. And using whatever tools you have on hand. I don't have all my tools in South Carolina, but I have a few things, and also there are things you can just use that you have laying around. I mean, you'll see in a little while I'm going to use a plastic spoon, the back of a plastic spoon. Get that wet and then use the back of that to do a lot of the forming, and that's a really easy. There you go. There's my spoon. And just watch how slick this works. You can press right into the tin foil. It also helps kind of create a texture, which is neat. That could be your final texture. You wouldn't have to have an additional bark texture. All of this is going to be very personal to your style, which I promise will evolve over time. That's just the nature of art. As you learn different techniques and recognize your own style, what you like, and you discover different tools and all of that. But yeah, the back of a spoon can be a really valuable piece of equipment in this. Pretty slick, huh? You can also use a fork, a knife, a butter knife, or even a plastic knife for making texture. Anything that you have. You don't have to buy all the tools, carving tools. Use what you have until just use what you have if you don't want to buy anything. Now I am going to use this tool, and I don't know how to describe it. It's serrated, I guess, and I'm rolling it and creating texture. I'm having trouble describing how to describe this tool, but hopefully you can see it has grooves on it, It comes to a point, but then there are grooves all the way down. So I'm pulling it down and twisting it slightly to create my bark. And I'm always following see how I'm always kind of pulling to the right? So you want to follow when you're creating the texture of the bark, you want to follow the lines of the tree where there's contours. So always go with the grain, I guess, is a basic way to say it. That's naturally in nature how it would happen. If a tree is twisting to the right, the bark is also going to twist to the right. The lines of the bark are also going to twist to the right because that's the way it has grown, which sounds very simplistic, but it's something we always have to keep in mind, that we're not pulling what I'm doing here. If I was pulling it to the left instead of the right, when the contours are going to the right and the grooves are going to the right, it wouldn't look right. It wouldn't look natural. So you always have to kind of go with the grain, I guess, is maybe the thing to keep in your head. It's fun to find tools, though, and use and see how they can work for you. But you also see that I'm using my finger a lot to smooth it out and to mellow out the texture I've just created, often getting a little bit of water on my finger right before I do that. So this to me is the fun part. I think this is just a lot of fun to create this texture. Another tool, just for smaller details. This kind of reminds me of a Winnie the Pooh tree. I just love this, how gnarly it is and still so simple. And as you're working, if the other sections of clay are starting to harden up, just put some water on them to keep it more pliable. You could use a water spritzer or just, your hand and just rub some water on there just to kind of keep it soft and more workable. Okay, so making progress. You can see the negative spaces and the little holes I've created, the heart that you can see right through to the base of the bottle. So just working on it little by little. And you can take as little or as much time as you want on this. For a lot of sculptors, this is the favorite part, is doing the texture. So truly, just make it your own. Watching me is a fun way to just open your mind. But when it comes to making your own, make it your own and use your own ideas and work at your own pace. You're the artist here. Doesn't that look like fun? It is a lot of fun. If you notice how I'm doing the ends of the roots they're kind of coming to a point. And I noticed I had used some extra water to kind of keep that all firm and solid, the tip of it, so it doesn't crack open, because that area tends to dry out. You want that to be stable by the time it dries. And the branches I address the same way, okay, because you want those branches, the ends of the branches, to be nice and solid with no cracks, because we're going to be drilling into them actually with a drill, to apply the leaves, and you'll see what I mean in just a few minutes. Okay, getting there. And now it's all done. Isn't that fun? You see how the clay gets whiter as it's drying. I just love it in its white state. So here we are, it's dry, and I'm using some sandpaper, and sanding off any rough ridges. Lightly. You don't even have, you could skip this step, but I don't know, I like to do it. I like it a little bit smoother. And it gets real dusty, so you want to then take a damp rag and wipe that off so that it doesn't get into your paint. Again, don't worry so much about the windows if they look hazy or if they need to be cleaned up. You do that at the very end. Okay, so now I'm going to start to paint. And my vision for this first coat of paint was to do a very light tan, and I kind of went a little crazy with the yellow. I put too much yellow, but you'll see I'll keep playing with it, and then I'll do some layers, and I eventually get it to exactly where I want it. So I'm going to paint the entire piece in a really light color because it's spring. And I know already this is much too yellow, so I'm going to add some more white and some more brown. But, if you probably could just buy the paints and not have to mix anything. Like I said, these craft paints are very inexpensive, so you don't have to do this kind of mixing if you're not comfortable mixing. You can use it straight out of the bottle if you have the colors that you want. A little bit more brown. Okay, now we're getting much closer to what I first had in mind for the base coat. Again, I want this tree to be very light in color, light and airy feeling with just a little bit of green, which would kind of indicate moss. If you look at a tree, a lot of times there is green on the bark. And it will eventually it'll pull up, it will work with the green of the leaves, and everything will all be work together in just a couple colors. Hard to describe. You'll see what I mean. Again, I'm way off to the side. I'm sorry about that. It'll come back in view. So I'm using the color that I mixed there, which is kind of a lightish tan, and I'm kind of doing some white at the same time. And actually, once I have the entire thing covered in that color, which is kind of variegated there, then I take some white and I kind of dry brush over the whole thing. And you'll see that in a minute, just because I wanted it a little bit brighter and a little bit lighter. But doing layering is a really good process. So don't feel like it has to be, you're going to put it on in one coat and that's the end result. You can always adjust it by by dry brushing. Or working with applying two colors at once, like you kind of see me doing here. So now I'm just going to take some white. I didn't even wash my brush or anything. I just, this is just very loose. And now you see me kind of dry brushing over everything lightly where the contours are highest. I guess you could kind of call it tipping with the white. It'll just brighten up the whole piece. Kind of cut some of that yellow. Just ends up being more of a creamy color. But it still has some darker tones in the grooves where they normally would be in shadow. And the yellowish paint underneath isn't even dry yet. I mean, my hands are getting all full of paint, and I'm just never afraid of that. You can wear gloves if you want. But I didn't even wait for it to completely dry before I started to dry brush with the white over the top. I'm just a very loose painter. I just kind of go for it. And it always seems to work out okay. Not the best filmmaker, obviously. But I do promise to work on that. I want you to be able to see exactly what I'm doing. Otherwise, what's the point, right? Okay. So now I'm going to take a little bit of glaze. And I have a light greenish color. And I'm going to take my brush, a wider brush. Dip it in the glaze with just a tiny bit of green paint. Okay? And I'm going to put it right in the crevices and near the bottom where there would normally be moss or fungus growing. Okay? I just think that looks so pretty to add some green in there. They haven't applied the leaves yet, obviously, at the top, but it also pulls it all together because the leaves are going to be a green, pretty light green. And you can see the little peaky holes. Don't paint over those. Just don't worry too much. This should be fun. It's not perfect. This tree isn't perfect. But what is perfect? I guess I could say it's perfectly imperfect, right? Again, you can use any color. If you don't want to do such a light colored bark tree, you could be using shades of brown or gray. I mean, if you look outside at your trees, a lot of people think of trees as being brown. They're actually a lot more gray than brown. But you could do you could do a fantastical color tree. It could be done in purples or pink or blue or whatever, but this is just what I had in mind for this time of year because I'm in a springy kind of mood. Light, cool colors. Because there's glaze in it, if you put too much on, you can wipe some of it back. And I think I'm just about to do that. I got a little too heavy right in that one spot. And I could have left it, but I just decided to wipe a little bit of it back. No big deal. No mistakes. You just keep working at it until you like it, right? That's what I'll always tell you. Just keep working at it till you like it. Okay, now here's 2 bundles of Greenery that I bought at Michael's. They were on sale. I think together the two pieces cost less than $10. And I'm going to snip them off into pieces. And you see what the plan is. I'm going to add them here and there. Some of them I'll break down even smaller. They just actually pull off and they're into smaller pieces. I'll use them in that size too. But I ended up using not even both bundles. I used about 1.5 of these two pieces that I ended up buying, like I said, at Michael's. Okay, so here I'm going to show you. I'm going to drill right into the piece. Maybe about, having a little trouble here, but I'll get the hang of it. Drilling in maybe about, I want to say less than a 1/2 inch, because you don't want it to come out the other side, but you want to have it in there enough that it supports itself. Okay, so it's in there maybe a 1/2 inch or less. And you have to kind of be thinking again about the way a tree would grow and the way the branches naturally kind of come out at the same angle. Look at the trees outside, and each tree acts a little bit different in the way the branches either fall down, sometimes they lift up. Each tree species is different, but just look out at the trees and see how branches fall naturally, how they're positioned according to the main branch that they're coming off of. It's interesting because you want it to look relatively natural in the end. So I just kind of go at it, and before I drill, I hold it up and I feel it, and until I'm happy with the angle or the size versus the size of the branch that I'm working on, and I just keep going at it until I am happy, which is really basically putting these branches on is basically the last thing for this tree. And and I'm adding some hot glue before I put it in there, and then I kind of wipe it off, So yeah, just use glue as needed. And you kind of hold it in place just for a few seconds until the glue sets up, and then it will be in there securely. So I put all the bigger pieces in where I had to drill in, and at the end, then I took the smaller pieces that I could actually pull off of the piece. They just have that little, it pops right off. So they're smaller. It's maybe about 1.5 to 2 inch pieces. And those I just glued directly onto I didn't do any drilling for those final pieces. They were just fillers, and I would, like I said, glue those directly onto like the tips of the branches and just as fillers. And to be honest, those aren't on there real strong. If they pop off, you may have to do it again, or, as you move the tree around a year from now, some of them may pop off and you may have to just hot glue them back on. No big deal. These little branches have some little white, I don't know, like blossoms or something on them. I just thought it was so pretty. So here's the final result. This is exactly what I was after. Very springy, very wild looking. And there it is with the light inside of it. Isn't that fun? And you could actually put some lights on the tree, some of those really small seed lights that are battery operated. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe and share with your friends, anyone you think that would like to be watching these. Thank you so much. Have a great day.